Good morning, folks. It's Catherine here, your on-the-spot reporter. And the spot is the living room. It's about 8:30 in the morning, Thursday 22, is that the 22nd? Hello, the pussycat's turned up. We'll see if the pussycat climbs up. Another book review this morning. I'm just on the way out to put this book back at the library. And remember a month or so back, I read the, hello puss, I read Unveiled, as in veiled, Unveiled, book about Thea. Oh pussy, you're wet! You've been outside, the grass is all wet with dew. Thea Pratt, who left the Gloriavale Christian cult community, as soon as she turned 18 she left and took back her original surname. They make them change their names in there, and the children that are born into it are given religious type names, first names. Yes, you're a bit wet, puss. In Theophila's book she mentioned Sins of the Father, written by Fleur Beale, or Beale, Beale with an E on the end. Fleur Beale, there we go. Now the corrupt and evil man who set up the Christian community, originally on the outskirts of Rangiora, I think his name was Neville Cooper, and after getting several convictions for abusing underage people, young people, he changed his name to, I think, Hopeful Christian. But anyway, and because it sounds a bit better, apparently. And that's an extra in there just to make sure we've got enough. This is one of his sons who was interviewed by Fleur, and she's written a book and she's interviewed. He got out. He wasn't quite 18. He was, a youngish man. But his surname is actually Cooper, his original surname. He got out before they were changing their names. He took with him his wife, although she was so thoroughly indoctrinated she kept going back. And they kept going and rescuing her, and she was so indoctrinated that only Neville Cooper, aka Hopeful Christian, was the Messiah or the prophet or whatever, that she had to keep going back to that community because only that Christian community was appropriate, and that all the other churches were false Christianity. So this is, ordered this book in when I read about it in the other one. It came in, I went and got it, and it's been sitting there for a while, and I thought, I don't know, it's depressing, I don't want to read this. And it had a bunch of photos in the middle, so I thought, well, I'll just read through all the photos and the captions, and a bunch of colour photos, mostly colour photos in the middle, and with some descriptive captions. So and then I thought, this sounds interesting. So I started at the beginning. Absolutely engrossing. Couldn't put it down. So yeah, I read that over the course of a few days. Yeah, I'm glad I got it out. I'm glad I read it. I did make a few notes. Oh, something at the beginning, just inside the beginning of the book. A little bit. A few pages in. There's a family tree. The awful man who set it up, Neville Cooper, otherwise known as Hopeful Christian, he had about 17 kids to the first wife. She died early, and then later on he actually married a second wife who was about 80, and she died within a few months. I'm wondering if that was to inherit some kind of trust fund. And then he married a third wife who's had extra children. Philip, or Phil, is one of the sons from the first marriage, and almost all of them have left. Well over half of them. A few of them are still in the community. And this is a list of the 7, I think, children that Phil's had. One of the times his wife went back to the community, she was pregnant, so one of them was effectively born in the community and stayed there. And I noticed the oldest girl was back in the community. And I thought, why? She lived out with her dad for many years. Well, it turns out when they were living in Australia, he was actually born in Australia, so he's an Australian citizen. And like a lot of Australians and Kiwis, they moved us backwards and forwards many times as verse. He was always a hard worker, always had good jobs. Would make work. And he... it turns out... oh, here it is, I've made the notes. So his oldest girl was just a teenager, had typical teenage girl issues, but, you know, no great problem. He was living in Australia at the time. The welfare in Australia, which is called the Department of Community Services, assessed the situation. They found he was a competent father looking after the children well, and they still took Dawn, his oldest girl, off him and returned her to New Zealand to a known child abuse cult, mind control cult, and that's why she's still there today. As they say, a teenager just didn't have the mental wherewithal to resist their indoctrination effects. Whereas the earlier book by Theophila Pratt, she was born into it, but by the time she was 18, she knew she wanted to go. And yeah, there's some great quotes. Philip, he did have advantages, being he was one of Neville Cooper's sons. They got more freedom to travel. He effectively ran some businesses. Neville Cooper originally, he started in Australia with tent ministries, ended up in Rangiora, which is just north of Christchurch, and first he was involved with some churches there, but they kicked him out. He was too much of a hardliner. Ended up, one of his daughters married into a farming family just outside Rangiora, a place called Springbank, but it's just outside Rangiora, which itself is just outside Christchurch. Rangiora is a small town. And after the parents were out of it, he effectively took over the farm. In the end, his oldest daughter and her husband left, but they couldn't get the farm back. They escaped the cult, but they had to leave the farm behind. So then, of course, he had this expensive farm. Later on, they went and bought more land on the west coast in a far more remote area, which makes it harder for people that want to run away. They're always wanting more money for building new buildings, dormitories and things. And Philip was making waterbeds. He's good at carpentry and, joinery. And much of the cost of a waterbed is a very strong wooden base that has to hold 1 or several tons of weight. The mattresses were bought in, the special water bladder thing. But his father kept demanding more and more profits out of the company that it wasn't yet making. It was making them, but so he started sort of, would you say forward advancing invoices or something, whatever. And he'd done it in the past when his dad said, "Oh, we got a big building project on, we need you to come up with 30,000 or 50,000, or in one case 100,000. And he would forward date like a few invoices and then he'd catch up on the money later on, because they were making a good profit. I mean, the fact is they got volunteers to do all the work. He left when he left and took his wife and children the first time, there was still an overdue balance on those invoices, and he was trying to work with the people at the community and the people outside the community, various suppliers and private finances. They wouldn't take bank loans, but they took advances from other business people. That was the test cough. It worked out over $100,000. So in the end, Phil went as a witness, and there was a court case to get for the businessman to get his money back out of the waterbed building business part of the community. And sometimes lawyers can work the words pretty good. And on page 128, I think it is, they said the lawyer had a line of questioning lined up, and he had one of the leaders, I think the leader, Neville Cooper, honest Christian, no, it wasn't, hopeful Christian. And the question went this way: is there a fervent steadfast in the community? Yes. Is there a hopeful Christian in the community? Yes. Is there an honest Christian in the community? No. So, it only worked because there was nobody of the name Honest Christian in the community, but if you used a small letter H, maybe there wasn't an honest Christian in that community. Phil, he moved to America for a while. In the early days of setting up the community, they'd had contact with the Hutterites. It's spelt with 2 T's, Hutter and then Ites, Hutterites. They're a little bit like the Amish. And they've got a big presence in northern New York State, just on the US side of the border, and also in southern Canada, across from there. They'd come out and had contact with Neville Cooper, hopeful Christian, early on, and they'd said, "Mate, you're this isn't right." But Phil, when he had his wife and children and not much assets or whatever escaping on the outside, he contacted the Hutterites, and they paid for the family to fly to America. And he lived there a total of 3 years. And while there, they were making a bit of money farming and doing a little bit of woodworking, but being he was such a great carpenter and joiner, he helped them make more furniture and waterbed bases to earn some extra money for the community. And they are sort of all the good parts of a Christian community without all the bad parts of what Springvale and later it got called Gloriavale when they moved to the west coast. To comply with the US visa requirements, every now and then they'd move across the border and stay for a few months in Canada with the Canadian Hutterites, with a Hutterite family or community up there, and then when their new US visa came through, they'd go back to the US for a few months. And when, after 3 years, he thought, well, I really need to get back to New Zealand or Australia and New Zealand, they paid for his fares for him to go home again and gave him a little bit of seed money to start off. So there you go, the Hutterites. A little bit sort of like the Amish in some ways, but if people leave the community, they're welcome to come back and visit, and they don't have to be cut off from family like other communities, cult-like communities force. So he has only good things to say about the Hutterites. I've helped him out several times. They tried to make a bit of peace between him and his father, but his father was, I guess it was, intransigent. His father did die a few years ago now, got to 92. And he also details how, so this book was written about 2009, so it hasn't been updated since then. Neville Cooper, hopeful Christian, was still alive when this book was written. He's well dead now. I do recommend this book. The Erebus and the Dragonfly book, I had to stop reading it halfway through. It just made me too upset to think about how the corruption and ineptness in the airline and then the air traffic investigation in New Zealand. And yet those people all got huge pay packets, and some of them got honours almost equivalent of a knighthood. This book, once I started reading it, I was engrossed. So like me, if you're a little bit, I don't know, intimidated or bewildered or just can't get motivated to start with the big load of colour photos mostly colour photos set in the middle of the book, and read all the captions, and you think, oh yeah, it's quite interesting. And you start at the beginning of the book. Fantastic. Highly recommended. Available from your local library, maybe. You may be able to rent it. And I do say rent, not buy, on Kindle or other e-book systems. Remember that at any time they can take the book back out of the library. The electronic library, I mean. So if you want a copy to keep, buy an actual book. Don't get tricked into renting e-books, which can be removed at any time. We've got some publisher's details there. There we go. I do recommend this book. I don't think it probably matters what order you read it in. You could read this one first. You could read Theophila Pratt's Unveiled first. 2 hiccups by themselves. There we go. Pussy is sitting down there. I haven't got the heater on, but... Alright, folks. I've got to get going because I've got to get this book back to the library. Well, I mean, I've got plenty of time on it, but I'll get it back so someone else can have it. And I think I did. I had something else ordered in, and I got a notification that came in a day or so ago. So I'll pick up the other one when I drop this one off. Alright, folks. What more can I say? Australian Department of Community Services are literally worse than useless. It'd be better if they didn't exist. And that's why his oldest daughter, Dawn, got taken back into the mind control sex abuse cult, and that's why she's still there today. So, there you go. And they knew they were doing the wrong thing when they sent her. So that's another annoying thing. I wonder if people get a job with the Australian Department of Community Services if they've got fired from the New Zealand air traffic investigation team for incompetence beyond the normal level of incompetence. I don't know. You'd have to ask them. Alright, folks. That's all for now. I've got to be careful to not tread on the pussycat as I get up. Almost a frost this morning. Yep. Okay, bye.